Right, looks like we go ahead and start. Looks like we have a quorum. Jerry, so hey everyone, welcome to the Community Board 1 in Brooklyn Environmental Protection Committee meeting. So we have one main agenda item. It's National Grid will present and discuss their new fossil-free initiative for New York. And then we'll discuss, the second item will be the district needs statement, and then old to new business. So, so first, Jerry, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Stephen Chesler.
Here.
Eric Berzatis.
Here.
Katie Denny Horowitz.
I'm here.
Yo Lowe. Trina McKeeva. Janice Peterson. Bella Sable. William Vega.
Here.
Laura Hoffman. Kevin Coster.
Here.
Thank you.
Right.
You have 5, you need 6 for a quorum.
I thought I saw Willis's name here.
Yeah, I saw Willis. So
Willis is currently not a member of Community Board 1.
all right. I know Laura is on her way, so we'll move right along. So yeah, so I'd like to welcome Razik Seabrook and a team from National Grid to present and discuss their fossil-free vision. So I guess there will be a presentation first. It's a bit on the lengthy side, but we are dealing with 2 issues: the renewable gas and renewable natural gas and green hydrogen. So, so Razik, I will turn it over to you. Well, I said just a little housekeeping. So we'll hear the presentation first, and then we'll ask them to field questions first from committee and board members, and then we'll open up to the general public to pose questions as well. So, okay, Razik.
Thank you for that, Steve, and thank you all CB1 for inviting us to present here today. My name is Razik Seabrook, and I am the new community manager in Brooklyn for National Grid. And what we would like to, in addition to us presenting our vision, we would like to present some ancillary things that coincide with the work that we're doing in Brooklyn. So with that being said, I will turn it over to our Vice President, Brian Grimaldi, for a few opening remarks, and then we'll get into the meat and bones of the presentation.
Thank you, Razik. So good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all again. I appreciate you making the time for us. As Razik mentioned, I'm Brian Grimaldi, Vice President of Corporate Affairs for National Grid. Pleased to be in front of this committee again and appreciate the time that you're giving us to sort of take you through our fossil-free vision plan, answer any questions you may have with regard to it. A few highlights before we get into this. You all know us as the gas company from downstate, but National Grid is much more than that. Both throughout the state of New York and internationally. Our business is primarily electric. And we know that we are going to have to, in our fossil-free vision, electrify a lot. And we're looking forward to that challenge. I'm looking forward to working with the state and meeting the CLCPA goals on time. And we think we have a plan to get there. A lot of what you've heard to date from various groups is a lot about the how, a lot about the what. And we're here to tell you a little bit more about the how. In terms of our resolve to do this, we're going to show you a little bit from our National Grid Ventures group today. My colleague Alana Russo will take you through some of our offshore wind investments and some of the things that we're doing in battery storage and clean generation. And Don Shabazpour later will take you through the nuts and bolts of the plan that we launched on April 19th, that we have broad support for from labor and academia and others in the environmental space. So we're looking forward to telling you more about it. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alana Russo.
you, Brian, and hello, everybody. Community Board 1, thank you for having us tonight. National Grid Ventures is the innovation arm for National Grid. We have many assets in New York, including but not limited to transmission upgrades to integrate more renewables with New York Transco, as well as battery storage, solar, which is out east on Long Island. We also have all the generation assets on Long Island. Additionally, one of my favorite projects is our new offshore wind joint venture with RWE. RWE is a world-leading company in offshore wind, and we're really excited to be partnering with them. The official name of our joint venture is Community Offshore Wind, and just recently in the New York Bight auction, which took place at the end of February, we were awarded the largest lease parcel within the Bight, which has the potential to host 3 gigawatts of capacity, which is enough power to power over 1 million homes, which is exciting for us as we're developing out this project. Our Community Offshore Wind joint venture is committed to delivering sustainable energy safely, reliably, and efficiently to the communities that we serve. It's important for us that everyone benefits from the clean energy transition, and that is why our tagline for this joint venture is local clean energy for all. And Community Offshore Wind is looking to build strong communities, bring in new jobs, and help with the transition. Lastly, I just want to add that with all of our projects, but especially with our Community Offshore Wind project, we're always looking for community feedback, especially to shape our projects. So please don't hesitate to ever reach out. Thank you.
So good
Thank you.
evening, everyone.
Passing it
Thank you
on.
for having me, and thank you for your time. So about a little over a month ago, we released our fossil-free plan, which I'll take you through. It is a very exciting and I think a very ambitious plan. And just to make a distinction, we've had our net zero for a couple of years almost. This goes beyond that because we are basically saying we will be a company, as an energy company, that will be fossil-free by 2050. I have presented this deck a number of times, but this is the shortest amount of time that I've had to cover it. So I will just distill it and hit the highlights of our plan. So next slide, please. It basically has 4 fundamental pillars. The first one is very aggressive energy efficiency. It doesn't matter how you heat your home or you cool it, whether it's electricity or natural gas. If it leaks, you can achieve the emissions that we're trying to get to by 2050. And we will be doing a lot of work, particularly in the new buildings and the building codes, how we really tighten those buildings, as well as the existing feedstock of all the buildings. I'll quickly just skip the second pillar. I'll come back to it. The third pillar is this widespread adoption of what we're calling hybrid systems. These hybrid heating system means that these are systems that run both on electricity and natural gas. They are running heat pumps on the shoulder months, basically October, November, and March and April, and during the coldest months out of the year. So think, December, January, February, they are using gas. So that's what the term hybrid means. And a very significant amount of the pillar 4 is electrification and network geothermal. And I'll take you through some of the more details soon, but I'll just come back to quickly what I mentioned. What makes this plan really ambitious and unique is the second one, a network that will be basically 100% fossil free by 2050. Make a distinction between natural gas and the gas network. We just deliver molecules, and we will be displacing natural gas between now and over the next 3 decades to decarbonize the gas network. We are the first utility in the United States to make that announcement. So I'll take you through those details now. Next slide. Before we talk about sort of, where we land in 2050, I just want to start out at, where are we today, right? If you look at this donuts, the ones on the left, it's showing the number of buildings in New York today, where they are in terms of how we are heating our homes. About 60% of the homes today in buildings, this is basically commercial and residential, are using natural gas. We are the last part of the country where we are relying on heating oil. So about 25% of all the buildings in the state are using heating oil. We have electric resistance, about 12%. And in terms of heat pumps, it's only about 1%. So that's where we are. Only 1% of the buildings today in the state of New York are using heat pumps. In terms of our plan, which is this last donut to the right, as I mentioned, electrification is a significant lever, and we are electrifying, I would say, about 75% of the buildings. 50% of those buildings are directly only using electrification. This 25% is this hybrid, which I mentioned is utilizing both electricity and gas. And then 25% of the buildings are basically relying on these low carbon gases. And throughout the rest of the presentation, I will be comparing our plan to what I would categorize under this, umbrella of electrify everything, and that is also CLCPA as well, where you are relying somewhere between the high 80s to low 90s, the amount of electrification. So that is a lot of the studies today, and again, including the CAC, are relying primarily on this one lever to electrify the significant portion of the buildings. So next slide. This slide and the following slide, I'll just basically go through them simultaneously, is what I want to highlight is our plan. We have a roadmap. We don't just talk about the 2050. A fair criticism of a lot of these plans has been, you basically provide a target that's 30 years out. What we have established is 5-year interval goals. So we don't just say where we need to be in 2050. We put a plan in place in our roadmap that basically says where we need to be every 5 years, and we have established some targets around that. And next slide provides a bit more detail into that. Again, I won't take you through it in the interest of time, but it just, I want to come back to this notion that we are putting interval goals and targets between now and 2050. Next slide. So what's unique about our plan, right? What's special about our plan? And really the main component I would say is the primary one is this first bullet point. We are saving a significant amount of capital. This first bullet represents the amount of capital savings at New York and Massachusetts, about $100 to $200 billion. In terms of New York, out of that is about $70 billion of capital savings. And this really comes from avoiding a building of about 80 gigawatts of solar, wind, and storage in New York and Massachusetts. And in New York, out of that 80 gigawatts is about 60 gigawatts. And to get a sense of why we avoid overbuilding that amount of solar and wind and storage is to get a good appreciation of what the gas network does today. Today, the gas network delivers 3 to 4 times more energy on its peak day, which is the coldest day in winter, than the electric system does on its peak day, which is the hottest and the most humid day of the year, right? So if you begin to transition to take that load that's basically being met today by the gas network, and you shift all of it for a significant amount, which I mentioned earlier of those slides, the electrify everything, somewhere between 85 to 95%, you really need to overbuild the electric system. And then the electric system begins to move from a summer peaking system to a winter peaking system, and wind and solar are intermittent. So you really have to build a significant amount to meet the reliability standard and storage. So what our plan does, it gets the same level of emission reductions, but I want to give you an appreciation why we're saying that it reduces that amount of capital. And if you translate these sort of large numbers, what it translates to the average home in New York, it's about $1,000 less annually to heat your home. So if you translate again this capital avoidance of 80 gigawatts, which again translates to 60 gigawatts in New York, it comes down to customers paying $1,000 less on your annual heating bill. The other part of that I think is pretty significant and important of our fossil-free plan is because we are decarbonizing both networks, we are preserving customer choice. You don't have to rely on one technology solution. I think what I find very compelling about our plan is that we are not telling customers to adopt a single technology. You can use a heat pump if you like. You can keep your existing gas system, use geothermal or a dual fuel heating system. We get to the same place in terms of 2050. If you preserve customer choice, it also means you are not leaving any customer behind. And I'll come back to this. And I think at the end, we'll really focus on this point as well. We want to make sure that this transition is fair and just. And if you are decarbonizing both networks, meaning electricity and gas, which means if the gas network, you are leveraging your existing infrastructure, you are having a more resilient and reliable system. The gas network is about 100 times more reliable than the electricity network. And we will also be utilizing the existing workforce that is working on our current gas system and gas infrastructure. And we retain all of those jobs instead of saying they all have to shift into solar and wind. But again, what we are doing, we are decarbonizing the gas network in the same way we have decarbonized the electricity network through the technologies that my colleague Alana Russo was taking you through earlier. Given the combination of all of these, all of these factors, we think our plan has a higher likelihood of achieving the 2050 targets. And again, I can come back and provide more information on that during the Q&A discussion. So next slide. If you think about the way we decarbonize the electricity network, right, there's two basically sources, solar and wind. If you think of it the same way, analogy, there are two sources to decarbonize the gas network, renewable natural gas and hydrogen. Community Board 1, I feel like has a lot of experience with renewable natural gas and all the conversations we've had regarding Newtown Creek project, but there are primarily four feedstocks. It's food waste, livestock manure, landfills, and wastewater treatment plants. Our plan basically is asking for somewhere between 270 to 400 projects to be operational in the eastern US to achieve our plan. I think the first question you probably have is, how achievable is this number? And everything about our plan is we have really put it through the lens of pragmatism. We want to make sure that it's practical, not technically feasible. So today there are about, just to give you a sense, about 200 RNG projects operational in the US. 10 years ago, it was about a handful of projects, and there are 200 projects under construction. The one note I would mention, as I mentioned, Community Board 1 is very familiar with Newtown Creek. I would say that is a fairly unique project. No other project in the United States is as complex, just given where it is located and the complexity of Newtown Creek and what we had to go through the Public Design Commission and everything else. So I just wanted to provide that sort of a caveat because you might be looking at all of these RNG projects through the prism of Newtown Creek. And I just want to highlight, there is no other projects in the United States that is as unique as Newtown Creek. So next slide, the other component to decarbonize the gas network is hydrogen. And one thing I would say about hydrogen, there's almost an article being published on this subject every day. And again, if you can move to next slide. And there are all of these flavors and colors of hydrogen. You may have heard things like pink, blue, green, gray. Our plan relies on what we are primarily calling green hydrogen. So this hydrogen is coming from renewable electricity. And again, if you could move to next slide, please. On hydrogen, we are utilizing renewable electricity to produce hydrogen. And I can come back again, provide more details. I'm going through my slides very quickly, but we are basically utilizing the amount of renewables that will be built, primarily offshore wind in the East Coast and the Northeast, that will be somewhere around 40 gigawatts. So we are relying on a lot of that power that will be curtailed. There will either be times of excess supply or low demand to generate, again, to utilize the offshore wind to produce that renewable and green hydrogen. The one thing I would also make one distinction between RNG and hydrogen. RNG is a here and now solution, and we'll be scaling that in this decade. Our hydrogen will begin to show up in the 2030s. We are laying the foundation. We're doing a lot of work with universities, Department of Energy, to make sure we can blend hydrogen safely into our network. And the one thing that I want to assure you is, and the industry as well, we are doing a lot of work, and our number one priority when it comes to hydrogen or any other gas is safety. My last point on hydrogen is that the state of New York has also partnered with the state of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Jersey to be part of the Hydrogen Hub. Hydrogen Hub is coming out of the infrastructure bill that was passed by President Biden. And in the infrastructure package, there's $9 billion dedicated. And a year from now, the Department of Energy will at least announce 5 to 6 national hydrogen hubs. Next slide, please. So how does our plan compare to CLCPA? And this is obviously in New York's climate change legislation. Our plan gets to the same amount of CO2 reductions, if not more. It either meets or exceeds the same amount of CO2 reductions by 2050 by fully eliminating our reliance on fossil fuels. And as I mentioned earlier, given all the dynamics that I mentioned during the busy slide, we believe that we can achieve, there's a higher probability that we can achieve the same goals in 2050 than CLCPA by basically providing a hybrid pathway that relies on these both systems. As I mentioned earlier, we also believe that this plan also provides more resiliency and reliability on the overall energy system. Next slide. And we can dive into this, but we have spent a lot of time to make sure that our plan does not leave any customer behind in terms of equity and affordability. As I indicated earlier, our plan gets to the same amount of emission reductions as if you rely on only one lever, which is electrification, and we can get there on an average customer in New York. You can get there by reducing your bill by about $1,000 per year. Next slide, please. I know I'm going through these very quickly. I just want to give you a lot of times for questions and answers. So what are we doing now? So what are we doing to activate this plan? First, the first question we get about RNG, and I know this has actually even come up in Community Board 1 several times throughout the years. Is there enough RNG to get to the supply to displace the amount of natural gas? So one thing we have just issued, the company is an RFI, request for information, nationally, to get a sense from the project developers. As I mentioned, there's 200 projects under construction, to give us a sense of the amount of projects that they are working on. And that will really allow us to engage our regulators and policymakers to talk about the policy and the framework that we need, which is the second, chevron. The biggest, I would say, the linchpin of our plan to make this a reality is that we do need new legislation that would allow us to buy these renewable natural gas, these low carbon fuels, renewable natural gas and hydrogen, and integrate them into our portfolio. And that is quite, it is exactly the playbook that we adopted years ago, the renewable portfolio standards, to really scale in solar and wind. And it was those legislations, again known as RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, that allowed us to go out and buy solar and wind and scale to make it part of our procurement when it comes to the electricity network. The other things that we are doing, again, Community Board 1 is very familiar with the pilot projects in terms of renewable natural gas, but we will also be in demonstration projects in hydrogen and electrification, targeted electrification, and geothermal. So there is a portfolio of demonstration projects that we are asking our regulators to allow us to do. And we are partnering with local organizations to allow our workforce to continue to work on our gas system. But of course, it will be a whole sort of new training, how you actually think about, hydrogen projects, hydrogen network. And so we are working again with our local unions and as well as local universities and other organizations. And as we speak, we are providing comments also into CAC, Climate Action Council. The commenting period was supposed to end next Friday, June 10th, but that has been extended to July. And I'm assuming, and I'm sure that the rest of you in Community Board are providing comments as well. So my last slide, which is next slide, I just want to say that, since our plan has come out, we have gotten a broad support from universities across the country, local universities, NGOs, non-government organizations like Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, EEI, local labor. So I just want to again highlight, we have gotten support across the spectrum from a number of organizations and stakeholders that basically, I would say, are looking at our plan as a more pragmatic way to get to where we want to go in 2050. Again, I went through that really quickly, and I'm more than delighted to answer any questions during the Q&A. And now I will turn it to my colleague, Renee McClure, to take you through Project C.
Hey, Don, this is Rick. Renee is actually on location now, so I'll be high level discussing Project C really quickly because I know you guys are much more interested in the vision. But Project C is National Grid's holistic program to engage with the community. Largely, it functions on three main pillars, which are our neighborhood investment program, where we assist businesses as they seek to transition to the green energy future. Small business technical assistance grants, which again speak directly to what neighborhoods look like, and us, it's National Grid using our subject matter experts to assist businesses with things like marketing and economic development, things that are components that are necessary and relevant to local communities. And lastly, something that is very impactful, and I know something you all at CB1 are a fan of. We have an Adopt a Park program whereby we can beautify parks and partner with local organizations to make best efforts to try to ensure that the parks and the green spaces within communities are up to standard and are usable by communities. And so that high level is what Project C is. And to the extent that you guys have any questions about that, please follow up at a later date, Steve. I'll reach out to you to see the best way to communicate information. And with that being said, you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation, and that was incredibly condensed. Appreciate that. So I guess I had some questions that came to mind right off the bat. In terms of sources, you're saying right now there's renewable natural gas that's basically operational on the ground right now. But in terms of, say, sourcing for New York City, and maybe I was aiming specifically North Brooklyn, our district, how many sources are basically available or potentially operational for our area?
So that's what our RFI is meant to ferret out.
Okay.
We should have responses back in a couple of weeks. We'll be able to know definitively what sources currently exist, what's in the pipeline. Remember, the scalability of this will happen over time.
Right. Got you. Okay. And then just related to RNG, very locally, that with the treatment plant, I know it's been I guess a project that's been in progress, I guess, for maybe close to 10 years, correct me if I'm wrong, but is to see closure on.
Yes, we will open
occurring?
that treatment plant before the end of the summer.
Okay. All right. And then switching over to the green hydrogen. Actually, I had one thing back when you were talking about the 2050 goals, and you had three or four circle charts up. And the 2050 one had three shades. There was green and orange, and then the hybrid. And so I just want to understand, I guess the green would be renewables, but there was still a lot of orange, considering there would still be.
Well, 50% orange was all electrification.
There's electrification. Okay, got it. Gotcha.
And most of that hybrid bar, right, the green and yellow,
Yeah,
is also electrification, except on the coldest days of the year.
got it. Okay.
So basically, if you look at the plan, one
Yeah.
of the reasons when Don opened up, he said, I'm going to put the pillar 2 of fossil free at the end.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, the plan starts with weatherization and energy efficiency.
Right.
Aggressive goals get you about a third of the way towards your emissions reductions.
Right.
The next third is electrification and network geothermal and heat pumps.
Right.
And that last mile is a decarbonized gas network.
Gotcha.
So whether you're in scenario 3 or you're talking about your all electrification scenario, there is still an acknowledgement in those plans that some form of a gas network is required in the future, because you can't electrify everything, right?
Yeah.
And the disagreements that have happened among parties has been, what is the size of that network? And what we're saying to you is, we agree with you. We just think the size of that network is a little bit larger. And when you layer in things like resiliency and reliability and affordability, there's a way to do it with the existing distribution network. Remember, National Grid Downstate is a distribution company. We're agnostic as to what is in the pipe in terms of what we supply to our customers. And over time, we have the ability, backed by the science and the engineering and the procurement, because remember, we're a fairly large customer of whatever commodity we're buying, so we can move markets. We have the ability to fulfill this vision and do it in a way that allows customer choice, allows them to retain appliances, allows them to do to basically find that equilibrium between reducing greenhouse gases, which we all want to do, retaining choice, and doing it in an affordable and reliable way. There's nothing in this plan that doesn't achieve the state's goals, and there's nothing in this plan that isn't compliant with the CLCPA.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then one more for me, just related to the green hydrogen technology. Understand there are various ways to source, hydrogen, and I guess what they distinction between what's gray hydrogen and green hydrogen. I was saying as you're getting into green, there's still, there's I guess called grayish green, where
there is nothing other than green hydrogen in our plan. Not
Okay.
gray, not green, not blue, not gray. Basically, anything we produce on the hydrogen side will be done using renewables. And we're doing it now out in Point Lookout, Long Island. There are 800 homes that will start on a 5% hydrogen blend for hydrogen that will be made on site and injected into the network. Post Superstorm Sandy, those 800 homes were all repiped with pipe that can support 100% hydrogen.
Okay. And last, if I understand, is that there may be issues with distributing green hydrogen through, say, existing natural gas infrastructure in terms of how it affects the composition of the pipe, in terms of creating leaks, affecting welds, etc.
So we're studying that now. We have an aggressive study in place with
Yeah.
Stony Brook and with some other academics to basically take sections of pipe and test them. So we'll have clear data on that and understanding of what the existing pipe structure can maintain, what's been replaced. But remember, we've replaced a lot of leak-prone pipe over the course of the last several years, and we're going to replace an awful lot more in the decade to come.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying it's just a shame that they had this infrastructure project in Northbrook on the MRI. They were laid down new infrastructure that somehow that couldn't have incorporated the new technology.
I don't know that to be the case.
Yeah. So theoretically, it could use it. It could
It could
withstand.
be used to distribute everything in this plan
Mm.
in an effective and safe way.
Okay. All right. That's it for me.
Steve, we lost you.
Thank you. Sorry. That's enough for me. And I want to turn it over to committee and board members. Laura Hoffman has her hand raised. Laura?
Yes, hi, Mr. Grimaldi. I'm a member of this committee, but I'm also a member of the Newtown Creek Monitoring Committee. Before you said that that the treatment plant will be open by the end of the summer, do you mean that the natural gas portion will be fully operational by the end of the summer?
The natural gas portion?
Is that what you said?
Don?
No, I think the Newtown Creek project will be operational, meaning we will be injecting renewable natural gas from the plant into our network.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And construction, by the way, is ended. I just want to say there's no more construction. Right now, we're in commissioning and startup phase. We are doing all of our safety checks, all of those procedures.
Let me see if there's any other committee members have any questions, comments? Board members? Okay, then I'll open it up to the community at large. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand through WebEx. Yeah, so I guess let's take them in order here. Margot Spindleman.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm going to read a little statement that we've been thinking about because we feel like we need to contextualize National Grid's presentation. So Governor Kathy Hochul in her State of the State address in January asked gas utilities to minimize investments in costly new gas infrastructure and to promote carbon alternatives to reduce gas demand. This, quote, clean energy vision released by National Grid, in fact, does the opposite. It has two core components: replace fracked gas with renewable gas and green hydrogen, and combine gas and electricity into hybrid systems. These elements are sandwiched between nods at energy efficiency and targeted electrification. The vision is a desperate attempt by a corporation stuck in an obsolete industry to find reasons for continuing to expand investments in gas infrastructure, however unproven and costly they may be. It promotes not only a continued build out of gas infrastructure, but an exponential expansion. It would encourage continued growth of carbon-based energy usage well beyond the time frame mandated by the CLCPA and the CAC, and would bust the limits scientific analysis deemed safe for averting catastrophic climate change. Simultaneous with National Grid's release of this plan, the company has cynically funded an AstroTurf disinformation campaign to discredit a legitimate legislative pathway, the All-Electric Buildings Act, to reach New York State's climate goals that had the approval of the New York State Senate and was enthusiastically embraced by the governor. National Grid's proposal is characteristic of the fossil fuel industry's disruption, denial, and delay playbook, and it relies on an obfuscation of terms, vague in specifics on implementation costs and rollout dates, and devoid of hard plans for specific siting or construction. National Grid's claim that it would partially replace fossil fuel with RNG is deceitful and pointless because, in actuality, it makes little difference for the climate, since the carbon profile of RNG and fracked methane are exactly the same when they are burned. No RNG infrastructure currently exists at the scale proposed. National Grid's plan amounts to an expensive and disingenuous diversion away from the urgency of containing the climate crisis, which is achievable only by drastically reducing or eliminating the amount of carbon we burn. RNG, dependent on confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, human excrement and food waste, introduces a host of health and environmental problems that are wholly unaddressed in National Grid's proposal. The plan also relies on other unproven technologies, carbon capture, storage, and green hydrogen, neither of which have been proven to be scalable, safe, or able to be built without huge investments, be they government subsidies, massive increases to ratepayers, or both. These technologies, as described by National Grid, would rely on draining renewable power at exactly the time it needs to be scaled up for consumer use, threatening its timely availability for ratepayers, increasing its cost, and delaying its availability to customers. Clean renewable energy should be used in its primary form, not converted into another product with the concomitant loss of energy. The plan threatens a major disaster by introducing highly corrosive hydrogen gas into an aged integrated gas delivery infrastructure system. The National Grid proposal goes counter to proposals set forth in the Climate Action Council's draft scoping plan, which specifies the mechanism New York State will use to meet mandated targets of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It was developed without consultation with the CAC, and with its opportunistic timing appears to us to be intended to deflect and counter the CAC's work, which is scheduled to be both finalized and adopted in a few short months. National Grid's proposal would be a boon for its investors, but would leave the state and ratepayers with a massive amount of debt in the form of stranded assets as more and more people leave the system as the CLCPA is implemented and available, feasible, and scalable clean renewable technologies are eagerly adopted. At a time when National Grid needs to be working alongside government, regulators, and the Climate Action Council, it instead puts National Grid's interests ahead of the health and safety of ratepayers with this preemptive plan that obfuscates and creates divisions rather than bringing clarity, cohesion, and real solutions to the existential crisis confronting us.
All right. Thank you, Margot. National Grid, anything in response to that statement?
Look, we've been working with the state, we've been working with DEC, we've been working with the Climate Action Council. We've provided testimony at every one of the hearings. We have our plan validated by experts, both inside and outside of the industry, by academia, and by those who are very very in tune to what RNG and hydrogen can do. So we believe in our plan. We're advancing it. We challenge anybody to come and stress test it the same way that any plan before the CAC, whether it's electrification or scenario 3, should be equally as stress tested. None of those scenarios in the Climate Action Council plan have full cost analysis. None of them address full reliability. Our plan addresses all of it.
And Margot, one key thing that she brought up that I had thought of before is with green hydrogen, the volatility potential. I understand it's in its state, it's more volatile than other gases, petroleum, etc. So how can that be distributed and used?
Steve, that's not actually accurate. And National Grid in its network served up to 50% hydrogen in the days that it was manufacturing natural gas. So the company has a history of safely delivering it, and it is safely in use around the world for this purpose.
Alrighty. All right, next, Willis Elkins.
Thanks, Steve. It's kind of incredible, the statement that Margot read, and the only response is that you welcome someone to challenge the claims without responding to any of the actual details of what was laid out in Margot's statement. And I mean, what I'm hearing from all of this is that there's not an example of how this stuff is going to work. And to talk about the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment biogas project as unique because it's the most complicated system you've dealt with, to date, and to even blame the DDC for delays, in that project. I mean, it's ridiculous. You guys are 6.5 years behind schedule on that project. 6.5 years that we in Greenpoint have had extra gas that's been burning at that treatment plant every single day, 24/7, more gas than's normally being produced because you were confident that it was going to be built in 2016. And so the city, our sanitation workers are going around collecting our organic waste, hauling it to waste management, turning it into a slurry, and pumping it into the eggs, and it's just being burned. 6.5 years of all this extra fuel being burned because you had the confidence that it was going to happen. And you still don't even you keep pushing the goalpost back. So, I appreciate that, sure, there's some challenges, but 6.5 years, we have till 2030 to get things right on climate. That's less than 8 years from now. So why are we talking about these pilot projects, these new technologies that don't have the track record, the reliability of direct renewable energy sources for electrification? And secondly, what is the plan for the 110-acre site the National Grid operates in our backyard? Is there any plan to, I don't know, put up solar panels on 110 acres that you own right now? It'll do something. I mean, it's just the most obvious thing. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, Brian, anyone National Grid would like to respond?
We addressed the delay on Newtown Creek. Site had to be relocated, had to go back through design. It's a complicated site adjacent to the creek, which has got some Superfund issues. It's not the easiest place to build in the world.
Baloney response. I'm sorry. The Superfund cleanup has nothing to do with the wastewater treatment project. Please don't insult us like that.
All right. Gene Bergman.
Thank you. I came with some questions, but I have some others having listened to you speak. And one of them is, it seems to me that you, National Grid, are cleverly substituting carbon for climate changing gases, greenhouse gases. So you can kind of technically suggest that by using so-called renewable natural gas, you will obviate a climate impact. Obviously, the issue here is the climate and not the specific gas that is in the pipes. Can you
Well,
tell
but
me?
in the case of hydrogen, though, there is no carbon.
Hydrogen, there is no carbon, but we're talking mostly about renewable natural gas, which is methane. Is that correct?
But renewable natural gas is carbon negative.
But it is methane. Is that correct?
It is methane that would otherwise escape into the atmosphere if not taken and harvested for another purpose.
And so this methane would leak at the site of production. It would leak along the pipes as it does currently, and it would leak outside the houses and businesses, and it would leak inside the homes, and it would cause the same health problems that other natural or fracked gases cause. Isn't that correct? Is there any difference when you're burning methane in your home from burning methane in your home?
And I'm happy, Morning, to take this one if you don't mind.
Sure.
There is a very huge distinction between renewable natural gas and geological gas. When you say that's methane, let me just say the analogy would be like saying electricity is just electrons. All electricity is electrons, but it matters what the source of the electricity is, right? That's why nuclear, wind, gas are all different. When you utilize renewable natural gas that comes from existing biogenic feedstocks, you are recycling the carbon in the atmosphere. You can trace all RNG sources to either this year's or last year's food supply. So when you utilize it, you are not introducing new CO2 into the atmosphere. That is why IPCC, which is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and EPA both, make a distinction becomes biogenic. This is, I just want to really iterate, this is not something that's debated in the world of, scientific community or universities. Otherwise, EPA or other governments around the world would not be, would not make a very distinction between biogenic CO2, which basically means this methane is not coming from a geological gas. I just want to make that very clear. They're not the same at all.
And what is the effect of burning biogenic natural gas in the home on the health of the residents?
Well, when it talks about are you talking about indoor quality?
Yes.
The indoor quality, and EPA has done an intergovernmental panel, not IPCC, just an EPA, that basically really comes down to that utilization of gas does not contribute to really health impacts in the home. It is much more of ventilation. This has become a much more ventilation issue. It's actually the temperature and what you're cooking. And again, this isn't my opinion. We can point you to the EPA studies that talk about this. If the other issue that you mentioned was, I think, not to conflate them, leakage is an issue that the industry is addressing, and we do need to tighten our system. And then we are the custodians in the Northeast. If you start from Philly and go Northeast, we are the custodians of the oldest gas infrastructure in the United States. And the most effective way for us to reduce methane emissions is to replace our bare steel and cast iron, which we are all doing, all of us, meaning all the utilities in the Northeast doing aggressively to minimize those methane emissions.
I think that,
that's important, by the way, to really tighten the system to minimize the emissions, whether it's methane and then over time hydrogen.
I think that there are many university academics and scientists who would argue that a better solution would be to replace those systems with electricity from different clean and renewable sources rather than any kind of methane or carbon-based gas. But thank you.
Can I just make one last comment? We're having this conversation that it feels like binary. We are either supporting RNG or hydrogen or electrification. I'm in the camp of that actually our plan has a very aggressive amount of electrification. 75% of the buildings are using electrification. 50% primarily electrification, the other 25%, are hybrid. So I just, I think once we achieve our plan, then you can talk about maybe we should push that lever a little higher. in terms of electrification, our plan is very actually aggressive on electrification of heat, but it is a portfolio approach. It's not saying it's only electrification. Sorry, Brian, I don't know if I cut you off.
No, that was good. Thank you.
Gina, thank you for your comments and questions. Ken, I'm sorry, Schless or Shells?
Yes, Ken Schless. I feel like the conversation is going in so many directions. I want to talk about, I mean, if National Grid is aggressively pushing for electrification, why did they AstroTurf a campaign to kill the All Electric Buildings Act? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't want to waste my time with that question because it just seems it's crazy that National Grid would be paying and lobbying and running ads upstate New York to kill electrification while they're claiming in this call that they want electrification.
We did no such thing.
Let me ask the question I wanted to. You were just talking about biogenic methane. The CAFOs and waste lagoons that RNG would depend on will perpetuate animal practices and adversely affect surrounding communities, many of them environmental justice communities. According to the Centers for Disease Control, concentrated animal feeding operations or large industrial animal farms can cause a myriad of environmental and public health problems. These problems include ground and surface water contamination and emissions of methane, potent greenhouse gas, ammonia, a respiratory irritant causing chemical burns to the respiratory tract, skin, eyes, severe cough, chronic lung disease, and lung scarring. Hydrosulfide, which can cause inflammation of the moist membranes of eyes and respiratory tract, olfactory neuron loss, and death. An increased particulate matter causing chronic bronchitis, chronic respiratory systems, declines in lung function, and organic dust toxic syndrome. There is consistent evidence suggesting that factory farms increase asthma in neighboring communities. CAFROs and their waste can be breeding grounds for insect vectors, spreading bacteria or pathogens to humans, including microbes that can cause dysentery and diarrhea, and mosquitoes spreading zoonotic diseases such as West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, and equine encephalitis. CAFOs are also breeding ground for over 150 parasitic pathogens, bacterium or viruses that are capable of causing diseases or infection in animals or humans. Sources of infection from pathogens include fecal oral transmission, inhalation, drinking water, and incidental water consumption during recreational water activities. The potential for transfer of pathogens among animals is higher in confinement, as there are more animals in a smaller amount of space. Healthy or asymptomatic animals may carry microbial agents that can infect humans, who can then spread that infection throughout a community before the infection is discovered among animals. Another byproduct of CAFROs is decreased land values in surrounding areas because of the constant, intense smell emitted from waste. Does National Grid accept responsibility for incidental and direct damages caused by this?
National Grid, do you have a response?
I'll take that, Brian, I guess. I'm over my skis to talk to be an expert in the CAFOs industry, but I've done a lot of reading and I wouldn't disagree with anything you basically said in terms of their sustainability practices. That industry has a lot of pressure on them to become much more sustainable. And actually,
which would also lessen the availability of that material for you to put as a, to create methane to burn, to put into your pipes. So you're still going to run. If we get rid of the CAFROs, you're going to be running into problems of where you're going to source your methane.
So I was going to respond by saying that industry has a lot to do to reduce all of the issues that you mentioned, polluting waters. One of the solutions that has been actually identified is not to have lagoons in that industry and to build digesters to actually reduce water contamination and to also address their methane. So actually our solution reduces emissions across other sectors or waste streams, this being one of them. And the last thing I would say is the feedstocks that we have used for our study to get to the RNG potential is all government data. And it's, if you really want to be more specific, it's the billion ton study. And we're actually using what's available in terms of the 4 feedstocks I mentioned east of Mississippi. So we're not saying the entire United States is available to us. So we are utilizing government data and their forecasts for each biomass that's available. I want to make that also clear. So National Grid is not doing its own projection of what's available by feedstock. We are relying on primarily, exclusively on federal government data.
Right, it's get on it. But in terms of those 5-year goals, inevitable 2050 goal, how much is, the feedstock from CAPO and large dairy operations as part of that? And I mean, I think it's a good question about the reliability of that. Who knows how that industry will evolve or otherwise.
We have targets in terms of volume. So we actually have the amount of RNG that we will need in our system by 2030, 2040. By 2030, there's primarily all RNG. There is no hydrogen. As I mentioned, we're scaling it. We have not broken it down by feedstock. It is primarily those 4 feedstocks.
Right.
But as I mentioned, we are relying on existing technology, and we did not get into some additional feedstocks that are not even, we did not include things like energy crops or municipal solid waste that requires other gasification. So I'll just highlight that this is an existing technology and it isn't mature. And one of the actually compelling reasons RNG around the world is it actually, what Ken is mentioning, these are other industries that produce, methane and other, greenhouse gases. And what's compelling around RNG is that it actually solves other sectors' issues. So whether it's wastewater treatment plants, food waste, or livestock manure, RNG becomes a solution that allows.
You'll be encouraging those practices.
Okay, we'll let him finish, please, and then
Sure.
you can come back in.
Sure.
Thanks. Don?
I just ended my statement by saying it is a cross-cutting sector solution.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry, Ken.
But by buying their material, you're actually encouraging those practices. It's not diminishing the problems. It's actually encouraging an expansion of those kinds of practices, because you'll be saying, oh, we can help you get rid of it, but there's still going to be all those problems at the source. And then in the end, what you're making is methane, and the methane leaks all along the distribution chain, and it comes into homes, and it's a carcinogen. It causes asthma. They say, the studies that I've had, contrary to what you said in the last response, the studies that I've read said that the equivalent, burning methane in stoves is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
So Ken,
that's still going to be going on, in this practice. You're still, at best by 2050, 80% pure methane in the pipeline.
Ken, RNG is contemplated in the draft scoping plan.
You're still, but your timelines don't match the scoping plan, and you've actively tried to get rid of the All Electric Buildings Act. So I'd like you to answer,
Look, we're an electric company in the state like everyone else.
Building.
We know we're going to electrify a lot. Electrification is a key
But you're not allowed to
pillar of
sell
our plan.
electricity downstate. You're only allowed to sell gas. So you talk about electricity, that might be good in other markets, but you're not allowed to do that here. You're only licensed to sell gas in downstate New York.
And there's a geothermal bill working its way through the legislature. We would be able to do that. There are a number of pillars.
You're trying to change the subject. You tried to kill the All Electric Buildings Act.
We've
And you're
been
talking about
engaging all of our
electrification,
partners.
and that you're still at the same time, we're trying to kill the exact thing that you're claiming that you're for.
We're absolutely for electrification. We've been working with our partners to make it a reality. But
Have
it
you been
shouldn't be the
working with
only.
the state legislature to do it? Con Edison came out for the All Electric Buildings Act. National Grid has come out against it.
We did not come out against it. There's no public statement from National Grid against the all
Do you
electrification.
have a
building.
public statement saying you're for it?
We believe in our hybrid approach. We believe in our vision plan. That's what we're advocating for.
That's not the question I asked. Did you come out to say you were for it?
We didn't
You
come out
keep
to say we
talking
were
about
against it.
You keep talking about, we're talking, the All Electric Buildings Act was only in new buildings. It had nothing to, it had nothing to do with your market as it exists right now. And we're saying we need to start electrifying, right? We need to stop digging the hole that we're in right now. So new buildings going forward should be electric. They shouldn't have methane gas. They shouldn't have carbon-based fuel sources. You're saying you agree with that. Come out for the All Electric Buildings Act.
All
Thanks
right.
for your comment.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ken. Appreciate your comments, and thank you, National Grid, for discussing that. Next up, Steve F.
Hi there. I'd like to get talking back about hydrogen. In theory, hydrogen has a lot of potential. There's some exciting things with the development as far as some of the tests that they've come out with. I think it's very interesting. What I think also is that it's something that kind of falls apart when the nuts and bolts. There's a lot of information that I wish I had that I do not have that does not let me kind of compare it to other options. I know I've asked you your company this a couple times over the past few years. You mentioned the bare steel and cast iron pipes. Now we know that bare steel and cast iron pipes right now cannot hold the 20% hydrogen that you've projected to put into these pipes. I know currently the pipes that you're installing do. I understand there's about about 100 miles of those pipes in the ground so far, 50 to 100. There's over 6,000 miles of pipes under the city of New York, all filled currently with gas. In theory, for this to work with distributed hydrogen, we're going to have to change every single one of those pipes. Now, that's going to be a costly and time-consuming ordeal. So I'm specifically interested in hearing how long, let's see, the question is, do you have projected costs for replacing all of that gas infrastructure? That's over 6,000 miles of bare steel and cast iron pipes. Do you have a plan for supporting the homeowners changing their internal pipes? I understand there's 300,000 service lines in the city. Is that correct? Do you know how long this process will take? Do you know who will be paying for it? Do you know how we'll be paid for it? And can you share with us a detailed plan that the community can look at?
Okay, so I'm going to correct one data point. 4,100 miles of pipe throughout the city of New York in the gas distribution network, not 6,000. As far as the other pieces, that's something we'll get back to you on.
I have been asking this for a couple of years now, and I keep on being told, I'll get back to you, I'll get back to you. After a couple of years of this, it starts feeling like you're never going to get back to me. Do I know, is there a reason why there's no number here that you don't have with you? Is there a reason, does that number exist and you're just not telling us, or does it not exist and you have no actual plan that is actually hashed out?
We'll look into it, get back to you.
Do you have an answer to that one question though? Why you don't have it on your hand?
Wasn't something we were prepared to discuss this evening.
So you don't have an answer is the answer. That was a
We don't
question.
have the number in our fingertips. What I could tell you, the amount of leak pump pipe that we have and the rate of replacement and then when it will be completed by, it's all in our rate case. So if you actually, I don't have it in my fingertips, so I don't want to be wrong, but I'm pretty confident we'll be replacing all of our leak pump pipe by late 20s and early 30s. So that's basically the headline. But all of these numbers are an nth degree of detail are actually in our rate case filings. They located on Public Service Commission in all of our testimonies and exhibits.
Now, I'm glad to hear that
And
exists
public
somewhere.
data.
But I'm sure you know that the finding a certain number in a long pile of rate case filings is very difficult. I know I've done this many times. I've not seen any numbers. Do you think you can pull those numbers up real quick and inform us?
I don't think we'll be able to do it on this call, but we will get back to you, I assure you.
Yeah, was it possible you could forward that summary to the board?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next is J.K. Canepa.
Hey, I'm going to talk about hydrogen too, but I just wanted to add a few little points about factory farming and the scale of the scale of the problem as we see it as a source of your renewable natural gas. There's no indication to us that our landfills and our food waste will suffice. Certainly not our local factory farms. So we're talking about sending bullshit, excuse me, all the way from far enough away where factory farming is massively produced, like the North Carolina hog farms or the Midwest farms. So as I said, I'm not going to dwell on, I'm not asking you for answers. I'm just pointing out a few problems that come along with the encouragement of gathering renewable natural gas from large-scale factory farms, which is that beef cattle, they're grazers, they're meant to eat grass, but to fatten them up, they're fed grain, which causes them to have gastric problems, which means that we continue to use large amounts of antibiotics in beef cattle and also in milk cattle. They destroy the land. Rainforests are cleared for cattle grazing. You know, these are just some of the extraneous problems that we talk about when we have this one little closed system of carrying those waste from the animals and burning it in New York. That's one thing. But I want to talk about hydrogen. And your proposal says not only does our fossil-free vision bring lower heating costs, now that's dependent on the future of the market, but it also keeps electricity rates lower by avoiding significant overbuilding of generational supply and network upgrades. So that's mystifying to me because we do know that hydrogen brittle pipes. In truth, however, we would need to overbuild in order to divert renewables towards the creation of hydrogen, using renewable energy to produce green hydrogen before compressing, liquefying, storing, transporting, then burning to produce electricity would result in an efficiency loss from our sources of 70 to 80%, meaning up to 3/4, 4/5 of the original clean energy that you're extracting from renewables is wasted, and even more is lost by being significantly less efficient gas stoves, less efficient heaters compared to the electric kinds. Energy Star, the government entity that rates energy efficiency, says if all the cooktops sold in 2021 in the United States used induction technology, the energy cost savings would exceed $125 million. The energy savings exceed 1,000 gigawatt hours. Direct electrification, space heating with heat pumps, and I'm really glad that you're including heat pumps in your plan, would use clean energy 3 to 6 times more efficiently than the hydrogen compatible equipment. So my question, in order to make up for the inefficiency of gas, whether hydrogen, RNG, or as compared to direct electrification, we would have to build out more renewable generation capacity just to accommodate the gas. Why should we do that? Why shouldn't we just build out as much renewable as we can, store it as efficiently as we can, and directly use it?
National Grid, do you respond to JK's question?
Could you repeat the question?
All right, I'll make it short. In order to make up for the inefficiency of gas, hydrogen, renewable, frack gas, whatever, that 70% loss, as compared to direct electrification, we'd have to build out more renewable generation capacity just to accommodate the gas. We'd have to steal from the renewable energy that could directly benefit us in order to make a middleman gas, hydrogen gas, and serve that into our systems. Why would we want to do that? I don't understand.
Want me to take this one?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I'm not sure I'm following the logic because the offshore wind, right, that is built at scale is producing electricity, right, at certain times of day, but has downtime when the load isn't at peak. And you take that incremental load and you run it through an electrolyzer and you make hydrogen and you get to store the hydrogen for future use, either in a fuel cell or for injection into the system. So there is no stealing from one source of generation to create energy. We're creating energy off of an abundance of renewable sources that exist in wind and solar. It's not an either or scenario. It's both.
Well, you're focusing on offshore wind, and I didn't think that was the sole source of the generation. Besides, offshore, the wind blows all the time.
So maybe I'll do a quick response. This was a compound question, and we can get into the weeds and really, and I know my colleagues will say, don't go far into the engineering details, but it's very provided just to high level, okay, without going too far into the weeds. Our plan actually increases the utilization of renewables, not the other way around. Exactly what Brian just said. By 2050, there will be 40 gigawatts of offshore wind in Northeast, let's say from New Jersey all the way up to New England. 5% curtailment of that 40 gigawatts would produce 9 terawatt hours of energy that we can store as a gas. So if you think of the gas network actually becomes a giant battery, large duration, large amount of capacity. Solar actually has a lower availability than offshore wind. So the numbers actually get worse if you go look at exclusively on solar. So this does become a more reliability and resiliency. And again, our plan actually increases the utilization of renewables, not decreasing them, and also backs up. The one other thing, without getting into energy efficiency, and I can just say that gas systems, when you consider it from the entire life cycle, is much, much more efficient than the electric. And this is just, I've come from the electric side of my career as well. But if you put if you produce 100 units of energy to power plants, by the time it gets to your house, you only have about 60 units of energy. But once you put 100 units of energy into the gas network, about 98 of those units get to your home. The last thing I'll say is, when you run pathway modeling under CAC or any other pathway, if you rely primarily on electrification, your peak demand on the coldest days of the year become really high. And you need actually these gases that we were talking about to produce the same amount of electricity on those coldest days. So your actual, and we have done some of this analysis in other jurisdictions like Massachusetts, your reliance on the peak day on the gas network actually goes higher if you only rely on electrification. I know that may feel like counterintuitive, and I promise not to go into the weeds, but we can, again, we have done a lot of modeling and analysis, and we welcome the scrutiny to go through it to basically point out to the main issues that I just covered. So I hope that was sufficient, and I know, without going too far into the weeds, I hope I addressed them.
Right. Thank you, JK and Don and Brian. Michael Davis, you're up next.
Since there is no answer to why National Grid is opposing the All Electrification Building Act, I can only assume it's because it's not good for a company that distributes gas and wants to burn it. I have some questions about how you actually are going to distribute the hydrogen. I mean, since the hydrogen molecule is so tiny, it can leak. It can leak through pipeline walls and points of connection at much greater volumes than methane. It also makes pipes much more brittle. How much of your existing pipeline infrastructure would need to be replaced to handle the hydrogen? Has National Grid done an analysis of the impact of hydrogen to aging infrastructure within homes, some installations that in many cases are 100 years old or more?
So, as we mentioned earlier, we are studying that now, and we will address it.
Well, a follow-up would be, what would it cost ratepayers to replace these pipes? I mean,
That again is in the rate case filing.
Buildings. Yes, well, that's how much would it cost?
We'll get that
What's
answer
the
to you.
projected cost to the ratepayer? And it seems to me that would be an incredibly relevant question. Blank?
We referred you to our rate case, but we'll get you an answer.
Why don't you refer to us now? This is the community board hearing.
I don't have that information available to me at my fingertips.
So, all right, we're gonna send it to the board. Look forward to seeing the numbers.
Steve?
Yes, who's that? Is that Eric?
Yeah. So there are what, 4 members of National Grid here? I think somebody, while we're asking questions, can just look that up. No, if it's in the rate case, somebody should understand how to pull that up by the end of the question series.
We'll get it back to you. It might not be tonight, but we'll get it back to you.
Seems easy enough to get it by the end of the meeting. It'd be great if you could.
I'll just say that we have done the modeling where we have compared electrify everything scenario versus our plan. And as I mentioned, there's $60 billion of capital savings because of the over build out. And that $60 billion, which I mentioned, would translate. But I couldn't tell you exactly, Mike. I think your question was, what is the cost of replacing which pipe with hydrogen? And the last thing I'll say is, when I mentioned that we are doing this work, it's not just us. The United States National Laboratories are also doing this work. So this is not a National Grid effort. This is also a national effort being led by the U.S. Department of Energy and the national laboratories that are looking into this, as well as a number of universities from East Coast to West Coast as well. So this is not.
But with all their research, you're still putting this forward as your proposal. So do you have answers to what has been found out in their research?
In what particular question? I can tell you that our modeling
and how you would ensure that current infrastructure would be able to carry hydrogen, and what you would have to do.
We're confident, and we know that our plastic system can basically take a 20% hydrogen blend. That's.
Well, there's no plastic system in my house.
No, actually, most like as I mentioned, we are replacing all of our leak-prone pipe. I don't exactly know where you live, but. And that's why I mentioned hydrogen will not be showing up in the next.
I live in your area, in the area you serve.
No, I mean,
no house on my block has any plastic pipelines for gas.
I'm not going to get into the weeds now, but I meant we have a leak-prone pipe replacement that actually goes neighborhood by neighborhood, and I can't tell you exactly where you live, but I'll just go back to my earlier comments. You won't see hydrogen flowing into the system today. That's why we're doing demonstration projects. That's why our Long Island project is part of this infrastructure that was built after Superstorm Sandy, and we know it's all plastic. And we're doing our demonstration projects. And I can assure you that, whether it's our regulators at the state level or Department of Energy and DOT, they will not allow us to blend hydrogen into the gas network. That is not safe.
That's a big if, isn't it, in terms of your proposal going forward to reach carbon neutral in 2050?
I'll just, again, we can put a pin and come back in more details, but it's actually not a big if. Our gas infrastructure up to 1950s had seen over 50% of hydrogen. Of course, the feedstock was different, And people are seeing demonstration projects in Europe where neighborhoods are already blending hydrogen into their existing gas infrastructure and utilizing existing appliances. That is also one of the reasons we're talking about our plan. If you blend up to a certain amount, customers basically retain their existing equipment and appliances.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michael and Eric. Lee Zigi, you're on
Hi.
it.
Thanks everybody on the community board for spending all this time with us today. We really appreciate it. I'm Lee Zishi. I'm with State Energy Project and the No North Brooklyn Pipeline Coalition. And we were involved in the rate case. So I brought up very quickly, at least National Grid's numbers around replacing mains. So these are the big pipelines. This isn't all their distribution networks. But they're saying last year in 2021, they spent $250 million replacing leak-prone pipe. It was $304 million this year, $347,927,000 in 2023, and over $400 million in 2024. So you're quickly adding that up. That's over $1 billion just in the next few years. That doesn't include maybe replacing people's infrastructure in their house. So yeah, it's disappointing you don't have those numbers readily available since you spent, months advocating for them. I'm also really concerned that after multiple meetings, National Grid has still not addressed health concerns around the frack gas current system. It's very hard to trust you all since you said you didn't advocate against the Electric Buildings Act, but National Grid specifically testified at a public hearing on all electric buildings and argued against the time frame that the law says, which is exactly what the CAC recommends in their draft scoping plan. And so my question, I am more concerned about where all this renewable natural gas is coming from, but since you touched on that, my question is, you said this complies with the CLCPA, but Marie French's reporting in Politico on this says that would include rewriting of the CLCPA because you're not looking at the 20-year timeline for methane. So is that true that your plan relies on not looking at the 20-year timeline for methane? Because in response to that article, the president of National Grid said that they should not be looking at the 20-year timeline for methane, which is exactly what the CLCPA requires. And are you looking at the full life cycle, both upstream and downstream of the burning of this methane?
Don, you want to take that?
Yeah, so first question was feedstocks. We are looking at basically what's available from the federal government data east of Mississippi. We've broken down by feedstocks. To this issue of 20 years versus 100 years, it gets to be pretty thorny and complicated. But let me just say that one thing, we could utilize 100-year global warming potential or 20-year global warming potential. From our perspective, whatever is the regulation, we will comply. The one thing that people have not really understood, once you apply a 20-year global warming potential, you must apply it for all greenhouse gases. That's how you can add them up. So if the state of New York wants to use a 20-year global warming potential, we will comply. The one thing that was also not understood when these comments are made, and again, I understand this is because it's thorny and complicated. If you actually apply a 20-year global warming potential to RNG, it becomes actually the most carbon negative fuel in the world because you can take the benefits of biogenic and the way EPA and the GREET model, I'm just going into providing some detail without getting into the model, they look at the benefit over 100-year global warming potential. So if you condense it, the actual benefit of RNG increases. The other thing about CLCPA, if you actually read the waste sections of CLCPA, and as Brian alluded to this, the CAC scenarios actually have a 12% of RNG into the network by 2030s. It's actually higher than ours, but they keep the benefits in that sector and they haven't shown the benefits cutting across sectors, which is known as a pathway. And again, Lee, I'm trying not to get very technical into this, but people are conflating the benefits of RNG sides, and some of those articles, people are very confused, saying, I read the waste section, it's very positive on RNG, but if you read the gas section, it's not. Why is that the case? And the way EPA and California have addressed this, and the rest of the world, is you don't look at RNG in one sector. You look at a pathway, which actually goes to your point, full life cycle, cuts across sectors, and that's why, again, according to IPCC, RNG, just to put it simplistically, is a biogenic, it's carbon neutral when you cut it across a sector. Hope that was sufficient. If not, at some point I can do a deeper dive with you, and we can get into a lot more detail and detailed discussion.
Yeah,
Lee, I'm sorry.
that.
Ask you, what was the 2021 number that you had for replacement costs?
That was for Lee, right? That was for Lee.
It was for Lee.
Yeah, no, the cost for main replacement
Yeah.
in 2021 is $250 million. Yeah, 250, and that's on. We're paying that as
Thank you.
ratepayers.
All right, thank you. Jimmy, a follow-up. We do have to kind of wind down soon on this item.
Yeah, I would say that I'm happy to meet with you and get more details. But my experience in doing 9 years of this work is that there's no pipelines that won't be leaking with renewable natural gas, and that's why the 20-year time frame is so important with methane. And nothing National Grid has presented that I've seen fully accounts for what we're seeing.
So look, this is the first time that we've spoken directly. Why don't we set some
So
time
thanks.
up?
I would
Let's
love
get in a
that.
room and talk it out. Happy to invite you to our office to sit down and discuss all of this.
That's great.
Meet
Okay.
me halfway.
All right. People
You're
ask
on mute.
questions. Yeah, thank you. Everyone who's raised their hand before, I think, has been called on. Ken, Michael, and Steve still have your hands up. Did you have follow-up questions? Really need to kind of wind down because we have some new business and another item to deal with. And we
Sure.
on this for.
I mean, if I can, I have another question. According to the Climate Action Council, a strategic use of low carbon fuels, which is scenario 2, which I'm assuming this presentation is a kind of a weird, basing on what Lee said, it's a weird perversion of scenario 2. But it says it will cost more to implement and yield lower net benefits than an accelerated transition away from combustion, which is scenario 3 of the CAC scoping plan. Net benefits of scenario 3 are on the order of $30 billion in health benefits over scenario 2 and include reduced costs for energy use. And you can look at page 11 of the draft scoping plan summary. Is the release of this plan by National Grid, which claims to be utilizing some lower carbon fuels, but certainly not exclusively, an attempt to circumvent the determination of the Climate Action Council ahead of the release of the final scoping plan later this year? Will National Grid change its proposal in light of a final scoping plan by the Climate Action Council? And does National Grid feel beholden to legal mandates and timelines in the CLCPA?
There's a lot to unpack there. Let me start with, we will always follow the laws and the regulations to which we're subject. That's a basic tenet that's immovable, right? We are participating in the public process like everyone else on this call with regard to the draft scoping plan. We have a perspective, right? We are charged with delivering safe and reliable and affordable energy to our customers in upstate New York and downstate New York, in the electric networks and in the gas networks. And we believe we have a better way. And that's what we've laid out in our vision.
Right, but earlier you said you had a better way than the CLCPA. And also I'm wondering if the CLCPA does choose scenario 3, it will throw
No
out
decisions have been made in the CLCPA process yet.
It will throw out this plan.
There's a draft scoping plan that is out there for public comments. Utilities are commenting on it. Members of the public are commenting on it. Businesses commenting on it. Labor is commenting on it. And the sum total of those comments will be analyzed. Determinations will be made. A final scoping plan will be due at the end of the year. DEC will promulgate some regulations. There will probably be some legislation. There'll be public engagement and sunshine on all of it. We look forward to participating in the process.
This plan that you've given us today, will you change it in light of the final determination by the CAC?
We will make sure that whatever plan we deploy is compliant with whatever the final process is in the CLCPA process when it's done.
So what was the purpose of releasing this plan while there's another process in place to determine what the pathway should be?
The CLCPA, the draft scoping plan, doesn't analyze a hybrid process, and it should.
But it doesn't. So why are you presenting it? Because you said you would follow the CLCPA.
Well, hold on a second. We are commenting on the draft scoping plan. Our comment to the draft scoping plan is they did not analyze a hybrid pathway, and they should. And we've now put out a hybrid pathway, and we've shown people how we're going to get there.
But they've been working for the CAC has been working for the last, 2-3 years, putting plans together.
And we've been delivering safe and reliable energy to customers in this state for 100 years.
You had an opportunity to present this plan that you're presenting right now during the public comment period for the CAC, something that has nothing to do with the CAC, and you had 3 years to present this plan, and yet you presented nothing. You're only presenting this plan when there's when the CAC is
We've
already
been working on this plan for a very long time.
Right, but the CAC is really what should be guiding us, not your.
It's a public
business.
process. We're participating in a public process just
No,
the same way that
you're
everyone else
operating
follows.
outside the public process because you're doing this outside of the CAC.
No, we're not.
This is not a
We're
public
showing up at hearings. We're providing written testimony. We're with the joint utilities group submitting comments and white papers.
So
We're just like everyone else.
So what's this whole proposal of 100% fossil free fuel when it's only 50, when it's still only 50% fossil free, and there's a lot of gobbledygook I'm hearing tonight, but it's not following the process that the state laid out.
Thank you for your comment.
To make a determination. You're working outside of the system.
We're actually not. We're taking advantage of the public process, which is affordable to us.
Thank you both. Thanks a lot, Ken. All right, so I think we're going to close all right, Steve, can you make it?
Yeah,
make
have
it
a
quick if you
super
can?
short one.
Thank you.
What's called? You mentioned that one of the good ways to reduce the amount of emissions coming from the system is specifically what's it called? The leaky main replacement program. I definitely agree. One of the major ways that we have emissions coming out of the city is through methane leaking out of pipes. I'm curious if you have official numbers on how much methane currently is leaking out of the system as a percentage.
So as a function of throughput of our system, and I might be off on this, Steve, but it is in our EPA filings and then obviously EIA, I think is around 0.4%. I think. I could be off a little bit here and there, but again,
We'll double check the number and we'll get back to you.
It's somewhere around there.
What is that number percentage of what?
That is a function of what's called known as a throughput, meaning the amount of gas that went through your system, the percentage that was leaked.
Did you say 4% or 0.4%?
No, 0.4.
That seems very low.
Yeah, and again, those numbers are filed with EPA through our what's known as Subpart W and EIA as well. But it is a function of throughput. Some people don't know what the denominator means. It's the amount of gas that moves onto your system. The leak rate, just to be clear, if you look at the same number as throughput as based on EPA's number, from wellhead to burner tip, roughly in the United States is around 1.3%. So, and we represent about 0.4 out of that 1.3, and the rest of it is upstream emissions, which means the other sectors from wellhead to burner tip.
Okay, can I ask where you got the percentage from? Because that's actually below numbers that generally speaking are used.
That is the USGAGI inventory, and part of, if you're curious, you can Google EPA's Methane Challenge Program, and one of them is a One Future. One Future is an industry-endorsed EPA program, and in there it actually analyzes these numbers nationally by sector. In other words, it tells you what the overall leakage rate is. It connects them back to the USGA GI, that's the US inventory, and then it breaks it down by production, gathering, distribution, transmission, and distribution R sector.
You have
These
a
are, again,
non-industry
federal data.
source?
What's that?
A non-industry source?
No, this source of this data is EPA.
Oh, you just said that was industry endorsed. I'm curious if there's an independent one.
We had done it for EPA as part of One Future, but EPA, if you dig through all of EPA's reporting, is there as well, but you have to extract it, and it's a lot of analysis. So if you want to, it is in EPA's US inventory GAGI, if you want to exclusively rely on federal government data and do the analysis yourself.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, from National Grid for presenting and participating in this really robust discussion. And thanks everyone from my committee members, board members, and everyone who attended tonight on this issue. Yeah, it was an intense discussion, but obviously, the chips right now, everything is, the stakes are so high right now with climate and the ecological state of things. It's a really important discussion to have, especially in our district, with all the environmental issues going on that have been going on for decades. So, and appreciate the community looking out for its consumers, its citizens, for one another. It's really important. So, but again, thank you, National Grid, for taking the time to put together a presentation and having a discussion. And yeah, I would look forward to, if you could forward those cost numbers that we asked for, just to coincide with what Lee put out there. We'd appreciate that. And also a copy of the presentation, so I can include that in our committee report.
Happy to do that. Thanks for having us.
Great. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, so that's it for this issue. Now we're going to talk just a little bit about item 2, district needs, and a couple other things. I see Deborah is here, Deborah Scott, so we can talk about Newhart a little bit. So I guess I'll just quickly touch on the district needs statement. There's a link to it through the community profile on the board website and resources. I can send it. I'll send a link to it, to the latest 2023 draft. But I think it'd be really important, as the Transportation Committee did, for Environmental Committee to provide input on environmental related investment in the district. I just did a quick glance, just briefly talks about resiliency a bit. Let me just, but I mean, something I could create like a working Google Doc on, and during the recess, we could work on it. I can just, encourage people to do it over that time. I think by, September, if we could have that to submit to Gina and the Capital Budget Committee. Let me get that up. Yep, I lost it. Oh, here it is. It just, generally talks about need for water, sewers, environmental protection, name specific streets, waste energy at the treatment plant. So you could, flesh these things out a little bit, the details. But if any others have just some thoughts right off the bat about just some additional topics that we might want to provide content for.
Steve, one thing, it's Trina, and I don't know, my name doesn't appear, but I've been here all the whole meeting. One thing, sitting on the land use committee with you, I think it's really important for the environmental committee to make a list of what sort of the things that the land use committee should be asking of developers when they come to the community. And I think should that be part of the district? That's part of it. It's an instruction. So I don't know if it belongs in district needs, but it's part of what we need is an environmental policy. And the environmental policy should consist for developers should consist of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, but maybe there's something we can do.
Yeah, it doesn't really pertain to the district needs per se, but I feel like I think we touched on that before. And we have informed the land use committee to a degree about that. I think there's some crossover there. But yeah, there are definitely laws, like city laws that need to be complied with. So yeah, I mean, it's something else we could work on. I think we talked about starting a working document on that as well. Thanks for joining us, by the way. I did see your name. So, but any folks have anything just additional about the need statement?
And Steve, it's Katie here. The district needs, is that primarily associated with capital funding, or is it also for advocacy or awareness issues?
Well, I think it's primarily it's capital investment, but there are now, Jerry, if I understand, you can have two lists of priorities that are capital expenditures and expense. But only one is reflected in the district needs statement, or can we potentially describe needs for more operational expenses?
It's more of a capital listing because although we put out a narrative district needs statement, what gets turned into the city is basically a picking of the capital projects out of the statement. But I think Gina provided a letter to each committee asking them what she wanted.
I don't remember seeing that, but I'll double check.
Because one thing that sorry, Katie, again, I didn't mean to interrupt anyone, but a couple things that come to mind that may not be relevant because I don't think they're necessarily capital expenses, but we talk a lot about air quality and air quality monitoring on this committee. So, just the emphasis on keeping on top of that as a community board. And the other thing is also ensuring that in our industrial business zones that folks who are not necessarily up to code can be brought up to code, and just monitoring the impact that they're having if they're not compliant with the current regulations.
So it's more like, I feel like legislative versus an investment, right? I mean, the air monitoring, I mean, like that's something definitely could be invested in and implemented, but in terms of businesses being compliant or getting up to code, unless you're implying that there should be subsidies or tax credits or something to help these institutions get compliant.
Yeah, correct. Like I was saying, I don't know if it's necessarily applicable for this district needs. Maybe it's more for a narrative if narrative is put forth, or maybe it's an operational funding to do some extra investigation into those businesses.
Yeah, it almost feels it's more the adaptation narrative in so many different variations in terms of people, just businesses and residents living near the water, dealing with flooding through, just our storm and sewer lines not able to hand cloudburst events, et cetera. And all the brownfield cleanups that are going on in the neighborhood. So yes, that's, something we should, I think, work on getting in there. For Laura and then Eric after Laura.
I always feel like outreach, education, and also translation should always be part of what what we're asking for.
More specific terms, especially the translation.
Excuse me?
Yeah, could be talk a little more detail about the translation.
Because translation is always lacking, when we're trying to put information out there about these environmental issues. And for ways of people that speak other languages to even input.
But is that more like about board communications, or like when DEC and OER put out brownfield and Superfund notices?
Really both.
Okay. Sounds good. Eric?
Thanks, Steve. So going back to Katie's point and your response in terms of it bringing companies up to code within the IBZ, et cetera. If, from what I understand Jerry to say, is that the council and the borough president, et cetera, look at the district needs statement to organize the budget and to allocate funds, it's not so much a legislative as it is to provide more funding for enforcement. I mean, just in the case of waste transfer station compliance, I was just thinking about this today, and Laura will remember, the Men in Black, there are 4 of them for the entire city to go around and, do enforcement on leaking waste hole trailers and open facilities, blowing, effluent out into the street, et cetera, et cetera. So to Katie's point, I think perhaps, and obviously we need to, drill down into this a little bit better, is a way to allocate funding for better enforcement, code enforcement, DOB, sanitation, DEP, et cetera, within the district, and additional inspectors resourced in the budget, in the city budget. So.
Sounds great. That's great. All right. Willis?
Thanks, Steve. I just want to throw in, I think that green infrastructure should be included in the district needs, for the reasons that, green infrastructure is like doing so many different things at once. It's a very cost-effective way to keep stormwater out of the sewer system and improve the quality of water. Also, CSO has been documented as a emission of greenhouse gases as well, so it relates to larger climate issues. But also, as we see with climate change, and as you mentioned, Steve, about larger storms, cloudbursts, and stuff like that, and obviously Greenpoint specifically, and parts of Williamsburg have chronic flooding issues when there's large rain events, and so. And then obviously, the green infrastructure helps, reduce urban heat island effect on super hot days, provide habitat, so on and so forth. But one of the reasons it's worth mentioning is that the green infrastructure program that the city runs it's mandated by the state, and it's only in high priority areas. And in fact, most of CB1 is not a high priority area. The only areas, I see William Vega nodding his head, the only areas that are a high priority area for green infrastructure are near Cooper Park, but the rest of CB1 is not a high priority. So there's no real active investment by the city to create green infrastructure and other parts of Williamsburg and Greenpoint.
Some sort of list of criteria somewhere for that? I mean, it sounds.
It's based on the sewer sheds. So it's about CSOs that drain directly to the most impacted water bodies. So Newtown Creek, most of the drainage that's going to from CSOs to Newtown Creek is actually East Williamsburg, Bushwick, Ridgewood, Maspeth, and Sunnyside. So most of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, all of that combined sewage actually most of it goes out to the East River. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have green infrastructure here. So it's something that, like, citywide, there just needs to be more ways to invest in green infrastructure, because certainly we want that investment happening in places that drain Newtown Creek, but we want it happening citywide, because it's also not just about the CSO, it's about the capacity of the sewer system. So if there's less stormwater going, into the wastewater treatment plant from Greenpoint, because there's more green infrastructure here, it means there's more capacity for, Cooper Park area that's actually, overflowing into the creek as well. So it's all connected, but part of the issue is that the city's program is only targeted on specific areas, and most of CB1 is not a priority area. So, and I'm just thinking about it like from the most logical point of view. It's like, we talked about this a lot, but Bushwick Inlet Park is going to have access to a really beautiful protected waterway that has 2 CSOs at the mouth, and the city has no plan of how to reduce the amount of sewage going in there. And right now it's only going to increase. There's going to be more sewage, unfortunately, in the coming decades than there is now because of climate change.
The interesting is that Friends of Bushwick Park called out the city on that.
Yeah.
That there was a report that was talking about how they're going to increase some of the CSOs, I guess, along the East River, and that those 2, it was a mistake to include those 2.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's really reliable. So, but that just made me think also about park design, that could really go further. Like 2/3 of Bushwick Inlet Park still needs to be built out. And the Motiva design's nice. It's going to be really good, but are they really embracing forward thinking in terms of acting as sponges and walls of defense with these severe rain events? And I've told Mark, some people that DEP, they've worked with parks where they're creating like hard infrastructure, like a basketball court, that during severe rain events acts as sort of a swale, not a swale, but essentially it temporarily captures the water, and then it dissipates after the storm is over, and has banked seating around the edges to keep the water in. Then afterwards, it serves as seating for spectators for basketball. So just thinking along those lines. So, but that's great. That's really great to get. That's really important. I don't know if maybe we could pull a little bit from the vision plan that is out there. All right, William.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to add that we all know the Department of Environmental Protection monitors and inspects air quality from outdoors, but it's the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene that inspects indoor air quality. Before the pandemic, there were only 4 inspectors for the whole city. When the pandemic, it was down to 2 inspectors. Now, I retired the end of October, so they may have hired, but it's always been a problem when businesses call me, about the air quality, and they call and it's happening specifically at 2 p.m. and 2 weeks later, someone actually comes to inspect. So adding more inspectors for the indoor air quality for the Department of Health, I think would be valuable.
Okay, but is that city DOH or state DOH?
City.
City, okay.
And New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
Okay.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, that's a great start. So I'll punch that into a document and we can get that going. That's great. And I see, okay, so maybe we just get into a little bit of new business. Deborah, Scott, are you still with us? I know, really appreciate you hanging on for so long through.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Good evening, all. Thanks for having me. First of all, I want to thank Community Board One for their due diligence in contacting me and keeping me informed of and sending emails back and forth to the Newhart, so we can just come to some common ground on to find out what's actually going on. Should we really be concerned? Because clearly, contaminated soils can leak through the chemicals in the nearby playgrounds and surface area of the water. And these materials can be taken up by plants, the animals, and actually drinking the water also. And so I'm really concerned about why someone is not here from their development. I'm like, they can't be serious about this.
Yeah.
They know that this plant has been sitting here for years before they even started construction. And I think it's so unfair that they're allowing, the only sign that was there was the asbestos sign, but I'm just so concerned about, I can't say I lived my life even though I'm older, but what about the kids coming up in here? They're playing in that playground, they drinking the water. Then we're talking about the animals, the plants. It's just, there has to be, and then I was thinking about the seniors across the street from where they're doing construction at, the water is dark. I'm like, they have to come up with something better than not saying nothing at all to us. This is unacceptable.
Yeah, yeah. I've spoken to, well, thank you so much for, being really speaking out on this whole thing, writing the board. And just so folks know, you're with a team of tenants from 5
Blue
Bell
Slip.
That's
Yes,
right.
from 5 Blue Slip. Yes, sir.
Blue Slip. I keep getting those mixed up. That's a development across the street from the Newhart development.
Yes, and
And
directly across the street from the park.
from the park, and yeah. So the board reached out to Department of Environmental Conservation and the developers, requesting they come in tonight to address the current state of the site and the concerns that you brought up, but both of them basically claim they could not make it tonight. So yeah.
I just find that so disrespectful. With all the, I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. Chesler, but all the new people that's coming in the community, we have hundreds of kids, thousands maybe even now at this point. And we need to know that if something needs to be done with the water, even if it's boiling, whatever, we need to know that we are safe, especially these children in this community who utilizes our parks and play in the playgrounds. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I know that Jane O'Connell, who's kind of in charge of the district, we're in District 2 for DEC for brownfields and superfunds. She wrote a response to the concerns, mainly around the drinking water.
Yes.
Basically, it's fully separate, that the drinking water comes from upstate through, the water system, and
Right.
the contaminations in the water table and the groundwater, which is separate from that. As far as the demo goes, she said she put it on DOB to address that. I noticed, I walked by a few days ago that that building is down.
Yes. And that's just in the middle. We're not even talking about what's going to happen in this corner. Oh,
Yeah, well,
boy.
so that they're still designing, if I understand correctly, and Willis and Laura here, they're still designing the remedy for the Superfund section.
Yes.
But even with the other section, the eastern section, they still have to come up with the remedy, the work plan for that. And I spoke and when someone from DEC, Rodney Rivera, I don't know if you know him from DEC, he called me to say that is going to be released soon, very soon. And I spoke with Lisa Bloodgood, who's the interim executive director of North Brooklyn Neighbors. I think I connected you
Right.
guys.
She contacted me as well. Yes.
Great. So we want to have a community meeting together
Okay.
with the agencies. So, go over the plan, but just to totally, flesh out all the concerns and have them really addressed in a really, clear manner. Yeah, I hear all the the science, I hear all the details, but the whole thing just makes me anxious, really anxious.
Right, me too.
Those plumes, as they've described them, are enormous. And the
Surely.
TCE, the chlorinated solvent, I mean, that is pretty, that
It's
can
serious.
that can seep up into, in vapor. The phthalates,
Absolutely.
they kind of just sit down there, but it's still problematic.
It's still problematic. Of course it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Absolutely. But I appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing in order to support the community residents. And I will definitely go back to the residents here and let them know at our next meeting what took place here tonight, and just follow up with everybody, in the future. And I just thank you so much for adhering to that, because I'm just so scared. I'm like, wow, all these
Yeah.
little kids that play in this park daily, and it's just,
Yeah, the
it's a bit
park-
much. And it's,
That playground is such a terrible state. It's just.
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I worry
This
about, I don't know if other people, just quick about the playground, when it rains, it floods.
It floods,
And
yes.
so the question is it just ponding, or is there water coming up from,
From
the-
the ground, up from the, yeah.
yeah. Laura, do you can say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, we've witnessed that ponding and even children wading in the pond. And over the years, there've been chemical smells coming from it. I've never been convinced that the phthalates don't reach the park at one point or another, because the water table always changes. We had a lot of people in this end of the neighborhood die from different diseases. I could get into more of that with you if you want. My email address is bargeparkpals@msn.com.
Okay.
Deborah, I can forward you Laura's.
Can you please?
contact
I
info.
would appreciate it so much. Please do so, because I would love to, get more details of everything that's going on here, because I'm really so much, I advocate for community and people that live in it. And I really, it's a real serious issue, especially when we're dealing with the ones that's coming up right now. And I just think that it's unsanitary, number one, especially when it clogs in and kids want to play. I was like, what's going on here? Like, they can't allow this. It's just not right. And something really needs to be done about it.
Yeah.
We were after them for years, the city to, do something to correct that issue. And in fact, they were supposed to correct it sometime during when the Franklin Street reconstruction happened, but it clearly, they clearly never remedied that pooling of water. So it's still, I believe it's still an issue. They
Yes,
can
it
stand
is.
on their head from now until doomsday. I'm not going to believe that, people weren't
Exactly.
harmed from it. So.
I get it. I really get it. And as I'm doing more research, I'm saying you're right. This is it's been contaminated, but now that I think where buildings are being built, people are actually on this land. And then, you're talking about the water system, the pipe system. They ain't not changing the pipe. They haven't changed the pipes here. So who's this? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would it's Katie here. I would also, since we're talking about district needs, we talk about the Greenpoint Playground and the flooding so often in this committee and also in the Parks Committee. So I would suggest putting that forward from both committees as a district need.
Okay. Just makes sense. That makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we had a Parks and Waterfront Committee last week, and that came up, the state of that park.
Oh, wow.
But I would encourage you, I mean, we're encouraging it on our side, but work with, local council member with Ressler and the state reps to mobilize to get, capital improvement on that park. I think the life cycle of parks or playground it's either 20 or 25 years.
Oh.
So I think that that park is well beyond that.
Well, beyond that, of course it
Yeah,
is.
that
I
was,
mean, I only been here for like 4 years, and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So, yes, okay. Yeah,
thanks,
so,
thanks again. I greatly appreciate that. And I don't want to get off the subject. You know about that, about the dog field, right? That they still using that.
yeah, we had a whole thing about the Parks Water Committee about the dogs. I mean, it's district wide. It's just,
Yeah, it is district wide, and it's so it's just I don't understand how people can be not adhering to procedure. Like
yeah,
that's TARP, and they really need to get a grip. Like I think that I remember because when we go down to when I go down to work out in the morning or early in the morning, they know that like before 7 to get themselves where they're supposed to be, so that if the patrol comes, they won't get
Yeah.
caught. But they really need to start finding these people. I'm talking about big fines, so maybe they'll be respectful.
yeah, no, no, it's such a huge problem, and
Yeah,
I've seen that field. But that's another thing to get on the council member about.
I'm going to call. And also, I just want to add one more thing. So they made one bell slip, a little doggy park that is like half of, I don't know why they did that. That was a waste of space, right?
It really is.
And I'm telling you, if the dogs haven't doubled in the morning, I have seen in the morning, I'm talking about by sometimes when I go out to work out on, it's like at least 25 to 30 dogs in the morning, and that's tip of the morning.
They can't build enough dog runs. We were talking about is Cooper Park. They already have a full-size dog run, and the dog people, the Cooper dogs owners said we have twice as many dogs. There's no way they would stay on that run, you know. So it's so out of control. I don't know.
It is.
Yeah.
Horrible.
So Steve,
Yeah.
in Cooper's Park, where when they had closed off, fenced off the lawn
Yeah.
area for seating for grass,
Yeah.
that's where they were having the dogs were there, not in the
that's
dog
just-
run.
Same thing in Transmitter. Same thing in
So
Transmitter.
they did
Hey,
put some
anyway,
grass seeds there, but I'm just telling you. But what's happening? All the people that play volleyball are playing in that spot, so it's always going to be ball. You know,
Oh,
it's
man.
just not enough space for everybody's needs. That's simple
Yeah.
fact.
But anyway, this is another committee. That's another committee. So,
Absolutely.
but at least we could type. You know, it's kind of connected to the environmental thing. So, yeah. So thank you, Deborah, for.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You guys
for
have a
your-
wonderful night, and
Thank
thanks again for keeping in touch with me. I greatly appreciate that.
Hey, you're very welcome. All right.
Yes.
All
Okay.
right. Have a good one. All right. Anyone else have, any new business or old business? William.
Yeah, just come September, October, I really would like to have that the City College students that did that a project on Newtown Creek to come to speak to the committee. Christine is a neighbor, and she's a City College professor. So I'm interested to see what the next generation, how they're getting involved in
Yeah.
protecting us. So
All right. Yeah. I know we talked about it, but can you send me more information on, or just give me more details on that? But yeah, I think that would be fine, essentially. I just want to quickly I know we're winding down, running out of time here, but NCMEC, it just keeps coming up. Do we really want to keep pressing DEP to have, just to increase the presence of this committee? They wrote back to us, said, hey, we're done. The plant's up and running. But it sounds like you and Willis are still, there's some sort of meeting or connecting going on still, but it needs to be, because there's still unfinished issues with the plan, obviously.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is unfinished business and unfinished commitments. So we would want, we do want to commit, continue as a committee. We are looking for support, and well, it's been a battle with DEP.
Yeah, so is there an actual written agreement that says DEP, they have to have form this committee? The committee has to convene amount of times a year.
There was, when they did away with the NCMEC office, they also did away with a lot of the files. A lot of the files got misplaced.
I see.
And yeah, so there's that. There's, I'm not sure if, Willis, do you know about the tapes? From
Willis,
the meetings?
Willis signed off, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I can ask Christine Hollowitz about the recordings. I'm not sure if they made it over to the library or not. But it would take a lot of work hours, to go through those recordings and to pinpoint, when the actual commitments were made.
Well, I guess, so what do you think is the best way to get, to deal with DEP? They're trying to increase the frequency of meetings again, or
Well,
should the board somehow hold them accountable for what still needs to be done with the plant? Or,
Yeah, well, I think you were on the last the last time we spoke about that about NCMEC, weren't you? Yeah, it sounds like of course, they're not willing to move forward with us as a committee, but it sounds like they're willing to give us updates, but they really haven't been doing that either. So
yeah. Yeah, so
all we can do is, keep on pestering them, because when we pester them, we seem to get at least answers about a few of the topics,
yeah.
that they seem to try to appease us just for a little while.
Okay. I know for our next meeting, when we would just put together a list of bunch of items we want to follow up with them, and we can send them a letter to either come in person to tell us what's going on, or
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
But before we even do that, we I could reach out to the other members of the NCMEC and, see if what their thoughts are.
yeah, that'd be great.
I'd really love to have Paul Terzi and Christine join in on one of these meetings, because they're the last co-chairs
Okay.
of the committee.
Yeah, that would be great if we get them in. So I'll follow up with you when we have our next meeting.
Okay.
Will be, I guess we'll keep September in mind. So that's great. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, folks? Anything? No? All right. Well, I guess that's a wrap. I think that was a kick. That was a really good, important meeting with National Grid. I think we, just to get it all out there. So, gotta hand it to those guys, the St. Energy crew.
And some of them were also neighbors that have been on this issue for years.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, William, for, being in the thick of that. So, all right. So I guess that's it. Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate, we've had such great attendance in these committee meetings, over the year. And so it's really, it's inspiring, and it's really great. So let's keep the momentum going. And so I guess we'll see you Tuesday night at the board meeting. But otherwise, have a great summer. I know we'll see you guys anyhow.
That's also
board meeting.